For 24 years, I trusted two people more than anyone else. My wife, Lauren, and my best friend, Ryan. Ryan and I built our commercial real estate company from a tiny office above an old coffee shop. No investors. No wealthy parents. Just two men willing to work 18-hour days. Eventually, Harper and Stone Capital owned office towers, apartment complexes, and industrial parks across 5 states. Lauren joined the company years later as chief financial officer. People often joked we were the perfect team. Ryan found the deals. I negotiated them. Lauren protected every dollar we earned. Together, we built a company worth nearly $3 billion. At least, that's what I believed. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday evening. Lauren texted me. Running late. Meeting an international client. Nothing unusual. Large acquisitions often required late-night negotiations. Around 9:30 p.m., I left the office to drive home. As I stopped at a red light, I noticed Ryan's black Mercedes parked outside an expensive downtown restaurant. I smiled. He must have been entertaining investors. Then, Lauren walked out. She wasn't carrying financial reports. She wasn't meeting clients. She was laughing. Ryan gently placed his hand on the small of her back as they walked toward his car. My stomach tightened. I watched, unable to move. Before getting into the passenger seat, Lauren looked around as if making sure nobody had seen them. Then they drove away together. That night, neither of them answered my calls. The following morning, Ryan entered my office carrying coffee as if nothing had happened. Lauren arrived 20 minutes later. The client meeting went well. She smiled naturally. Too naturally. For the first time in my marriage, I looked into my wife's eyes and wondered whether every word she spoke was a lie. I said nothing. Instead, I hired one of the best corporate investigation firms in Chicago. Not because I wanted revenge. Because if my wife and my business partner were hiding something, my family and my company could both be in danger. 3 days later, the investigator returned. He handed me a sealed envelope. I've followed hundreds of cheating spouses. He paused. This isn't one of those cases. I opened the file. Inside were surveillance photographs. Ryan. Lauren. Luxury hotels. Private meetings. Late night dinners. Everything looked exactly like an affair. Until I reached the final photograph. Both of them were standing inside a federal courthouse, meeting secretly with prosecutors. The investigator quietly said, "I don't think they're hiding an affair. I think they're hiding a case against someone much closer to you." My hands began to shake. Who? He slowly slid one last document across the desk. At the top, in bold letters, was the name of the person under federal investigation. Mine. For several minutes, I couldn't speak. The investigator waited quietly. Finally, I looked up. "That's impossible. I've never committed a crime." He nodded. "I believe you. But someone has convinced federal prosecutors otherwise." I flipped through the documents again. Every page contained my name. Every financial chart pointed toward accounts I had never seen. Large wire transfers. Offshore companies. Luxury real estate purchases. Millions of dollars. According to the evidence, I appeared to be stealing from my own company. This has to be fabricated. The investigator leaned forward. Some of it. But not all. What does that mean? Someone used real company records to build a fake story. That frightened me even more. Who had access to our financial systems? Only 3 people. Me, Ryan, Lauren. The very people I trusted most. That evening, I confronted Lauren. Not with accusations. With a simple question. "Were you with Ryan Thursday night?" She closed her eyes. Then quietly answered. Yes. The honesty caught me off guard. You lied. I know. Why? Because if I told you the truth, you would have tried to stop us. I stared at her. Stop what? Lauren reached into her purse. She removed a small encrypted flash drive. I've been helping federal investigators. My heart pounded. For months. I stepped backward. You've been investigating your own husband. No. You. She shook her head. I've been trying to save you. Nothing made sense anymore. She connected the drive to my laptop. Thousands of internal emails appeared. Accounting records. Board meeting transcripts. Bank authorizations. At first glance, everything looked ordinary. Then Lauren opened the audit log. Every fraudulent transaction had been approved using my digital signature. But I had never approved them. Someone had copied my credentials. Ryan. I whispered his name before I even realized it. Lauren nodded slowly. He gained administrator access almost 2 years ago. He duplicated your authorization certificate. Every illegal transfer looked like it came from you. I collapsed into my chair. My best friend. Lauren quietly answered. Needed someone else to blame. The next morning, Ryan called an emergency board meeting. Every director attended. Investment bankers. Outside auditors. Corporate attorneys. No one knew federal agents were already waiting in another conference room. Ryan stood confidently before the board. Ladies and gentlemen, our CEO has been involved in serious financial misconduct. He displayed charts on the giant screen. Hidden accounts. Foreign transfers. Forged contracts. Every piece of evidence pointed toward me. Several directors looked devastated. One asked quietly, is this true? Before I could answer, the boardroom doors opened. Lauren walked in first. Behind her, 3 FBI agents. And finally, the lead federal prosecutor. Ryan's confident smile disappeared instantly. The prosecutor placed a thick folder on the conference table. Mr. Ryan Mitchell, you're under investigation for conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and attempting to frame your business partner. The room fell silent. Ryan laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. The prosecutor calmly pressed a button on a remote. Security footage filled the screen. Ryan entering the accounting server room late at night. Installing unauthorized hardware. Copying encrypted authentication keys. Then another video. Ryan meeting privately with an offshore banking consultant. Then another. Ryan signing documents using a device designed to imitate my digital signature. Every executive stared in disbelief. The man who had spent years calling me his brother had quietly been building a financial empire using my identity. Ryan slowly looked around the room. No one defended him. Not one director. Not one executive. Then he looked at Lauren. You betrayed me. Lauren answered without raising her voice. No. I protected my family. As federal agents placed Ryan in handcuffs, he turned toward me one final time. You still don't understand. I frowned. Understand what? Ryan smiled. I wasn't working alone. The smile on his face wasn't fear. It was confidence. Then he said the words that froze every person in the boardroom. The person who planned everything owns more shares of this company than you do. And suddenly, every director at the table became a suspect. The room fell into complete silence. Every board member looked at the person sitting beside them. No one spoke. No one moved. Ryan was escorted toward the door in handcuffs. Just before he disappeared into the hallway, he smiled. You'll find out soon enough. Then he was gone. For the first time in 30 years, Harper and Stone Capital didn't have an enemy outside the company. The enemy was already inside. The emergency board meeting ended immediately. Federal agents sealed Ryan's office. Every computer, every phone, every file cabinet. No one was allowed to leave headquarters. Not even me. Late that afternoon, the FBI's forensic accounting team arrived. They weren't looking for missing money anymore. They were looking for missing ownership. The lead investigator spread a giant organizational chart across the conference table. Follow the shares. One by one. Every shareholder appeared. My family. Ryan. Outside investors. Employee stock plans. Retirement funds. Everything seemed normal. Until one analyst noticed something unusual. There are 17 shell companies. What about them? They all purchased Harper & Stone shares over the past 9 years. So, they're connected. Within minutes, the analysts traced the ownership. Delaware, Nevada, the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, Singapore. Different companies, different directors, different addresses. But every transaction ended at the same private trust. The beneficiary's name had been hidden. The investigator quietly whispered, "Whoever owns this trust controls 28% of your company." I frowned. That's impossible. Our largest outside investor owns 19%. The analyst nodded. Not anymore. Someone had quietly become the single largest shareholder. Without anyone noticing. That evening, Lauren entered my office carrying another file. I know who created the trust. My heart pounded. Who? She placed an old employee photograph on my desk. Taken 22 years earlier. Standing beside Ryan was a man I immediately recognized. Charles Whitmore. Our first outside investor. The man who had mentored both Ryan and me when the company was barely surviving. He had retired 15 years earlier. Or so we believed. Lauren opened another folder. Charles hadn't retired. He had simply disappeared from public records. Behind the scenes, he quietly financed dozens of shell companies, buying tiny percentages of Harper & Stone every year. Never enough to attract attention. Until now. The next morning, Charles walked into headquarters as though he still owned the place. 73 years old. Perfectly tailored suit. Silver hair. Calm smile. The receptionist didn't even stop him. Several older executives immediately stood when they saw him. One even called him Mr. Chairman. I exchanged a confused glance with Lauren. Chairman. Charles had never served as chairman. Or had he? He entered the boardroom and calmly sat at the head of the table. My condolences about Ryan. No one answered. Charles folded his hands. I warned him not to rush. I stared at him. You knew. I taught him. The room froze. Charles looked directly at me. You built the company. Ryan built the financial network. I built both of you. Anger surged through me. You framed me. He smiled. No. I tested you. Before I could respond, corporate counsel rushed into the room carrying a court order. His face had gone pale. What is it? He swallowed hard. Mr. Whitmore has legally requested an emergency shareholder vote. For what? The attorney looked directly at me. To remove you as CEO. Effective tomorrow morning. For the first time since Ryan's arrest. I realized exposing one conspiracy hadn't saved the company. It had only revealed the man who had been controlling everything from the shadows. And unlike Ryan, Charles wasn't fighting for revenge. He was fighting to take the entire company. The next morning, reporters surrounded company headquarters before sunrise. Television helicopters circled overhead. Every major financial network carried the same headline. Harper & Stone faces leadership crisis after billion-dollar fraud investigation. Inside, The atmosphere was colder than any courtroom. Every director had arrived early. So had Charles Whitmore. He sat calmly at the head of the conference table. A silver folder rested in front of him. When I entered, he smiled. "Good morning." I ignored him. Corporate counsel stood and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin the emergency shareholder meeting." The company's bylaws required a 70% vote to remove a sitting CEO. Charles already controlled 28%. If he convinced enough institutional investors, my career would end before lunch. One by one, representatives cast their votes. 28%. 35. 41. 48. The room grew quieter with every number. Then, my phone vibrated. It was Lauren. She wasn't in the boardroom. She had spent the last 12 hours working with forensic accountants. Her text contained only 4 words. "Delay the final vote." I immediately stood. "Before we continue, I have evidence the ownership records are incomplete." Charles laughed softly. "Another delay. The shareholders deserve certainty." "So do I." The board reluctantly agreed to a 15-minute recess. I rushed into my office. Lauren was already waiting. She placed a weathered ledger on my desk. We found it inside Ryan's private storage unit. It wasn't a financial statement. It was a handwritten journal. Ryan's journal. Every meeting, every payment, every secret. Recorded over 12 years. One page immediately caught my attention. Charles never intended to let Daniel remain CEO. Another page. "Once we control 51%, the family will lose everything." Then came the final entry. Written only 3 days before Ryan's arrest. "I finally know who Charles really works for." There was no name. Only an address. A quiet office building in Boston. Lauren looked at me. "Our investigators went there this morning." "What did they find?" She took a deep breath. "The office has never belonged to Charles." "Who owns it?" She slowly turned the final page. Printed on the lease agreement was the name of one of the world's largest private equity firms. Not as an investor. As Charles's employer. For 20 years. Charles hadn't been trying to steal Harper and Stone for himself. He had been preparing it for acquisition. The entire fraud. The fake financial crisis. Ryan's betrayal. Even the attempt to remove me as CEO. Had all served one purpose. Drive the company's value down. So an outside investment firm could buy it at a fraction of its true worth. I stared at the documents. "They've been planning this for decades." Lauren nodded. "And today's vote is the final step." Without wasting another second, we returned to the boardroom. The meeting resumed. Charles smiled confidently. "Shall we finish?" I connected my laptop to the conference room screen. "I'd rather begin." The first document appeared. Ryan's handwritten journal. Most watched the second. Wire transfers between Charles and offshore accounts. The third. A consulting contract worth nearly $90 million from the private equity firm to Charles. The room erupted. Directors began talking over one another. Several institutional investors immediately demanded an explanation. Charles didn't deny the documents. Instead, he slowly stood. "You still don't understand." I looked directly at him. "Then explain." He adjusted his cufflinks. "The investment firm isn't buying Harper and Stone because of your office towers. It's buying something far more valuable." He pointed to a map displayed on the screen. "Every property our company owned. Warehouses. Rail terminals. Industrial land. Data center sites. Ports." Then he smiled. "In 6 months, the federal government will announce the largest infrastructure modernization program in American history. Our land. He corrected himself. Your land. Would become worth tens of billions of dollars overnight. Charles hadn't been stealing yesterday's company. He had been positioning himself to own tomorrow's America. And suddenly, every billionaire in that room realized why Harper and Stone had become the most valuable company no one was supposed to notice. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Investment bankers began making phone calls. Outside counsel demanded a recess. Directors argued over one another. For the first time in 20 years, Charles Whitmore looked uncertain. Not frightened. Just surprised. He had expected resistance. He hadn't expected evidence. The chairman finally slammed the gavel. Order. The room slowly quieted. I looked directly at Charles. You knew about the infrastructure bill. He smiled. I knew before most senators. Lauren frowned. Impossible. Charles shrugged. When you invest long enough, you stop reacting to history. You start investing in the future. The FBI agent standing near the wall stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore. We have a warrant for your financial records. Charles calmly adjusted his jacket. You'll find everything perfectly legal. That was the problem. The fraud wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the strategy. He hadn't stolen our company. He had spent 20 years convincing everyone else to sell it cheaply. Just then, the doors opened again. A woman in her early 50s entered with two attorneys behind her. No one recognized her. Except Charles. For the first time all morning. His confidence disappeared. You. The woman placed a leather folder on the conference table. My name is Rebecca Lawson. I was general counsel for Dominion Infrastructure Partners. The name immediately caught everyone's attention. Dominion was the private equity firm secretly financing Charles. Rebecca continued. I resigned 3 weeks ago. Why? Because I refused to participate in securities fraud. The room fell silent. She opened the folder. Inside were confidential emails, meeting transcripts, internal investment memos. One presentation carried the title Project Eclipse. The objective was chillingly simple. 1. Depress Harper and Stone's market valuation. 2. Remove current management. 3. Acquire controlling interest through shell companies. 4. Profit from the federal infrastructure announcement before the public learned about it. Projected profit. Over $38 billion. Several institutional investors immediately stood. One of them looked directly at Charles. You lied to every shareholder in this room. Charles finally spoke. I created value. Rebecca answered calmly. No. You manipulated markets. Then she revealed the final document. A signed consulting agreement. Not between Charles and Dominion, but between Ryan Mitchell and Dominion. Ryan had agreed to receive hundreds of millions of dollars after the acquisition closed. My best friend had never planned to run the company. He planned to cash out and disappear. The FBI agent quietly placed another pair of handcuffs on the table. Mr. Whitmore. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud, market manipulation, and wire fraud. For several seconds, nobody moved. Charles looked around the room. At the directors. At the investors. Finally. At me. I underestimated you. I shook my head. No. You underestimated loyalty. He smiled sadly. I stopped believing in loyalty a long time ago. As agents escorted him toward the exit, he paused one final time. You've won today's battle. He looked out the boardroom window toward the skyline. But the people behind Dominion won't stop. The room grew quiet again. Rebecca slowly closed the Project Eclipse folder. I'm afraid he's right. I frowned. What do you mean? She looked at every director before answering. Charles wasn't the architect. He was only the American representative. Lauren's face turned pale. Representative? For who? Rebecca took a deep breath. For an international investment consortium that has been quietly buying strategic infrastructure companies across North America for nearly 15 years. Every executive in the room stared at the map still glowing on the conference screen. Warehouses, ports, rail hubs, industrial parks, data center land. Suddenly, Harper and Stone was no longer the target because of its balance sheet. It had become the center of a global battle over who would control the next generation of American infrastructure. And our fight had only just begun.